and through those questions identify what's the skill that you need to transfer. So point 4, this is a facilitation session, not tutorials. Then number 5, day and time of session to be negotiated with the facilitator. Currently, this is the time that we have set aside for this session to take place. Since you guys, you're only 2 or a few people that's in, will this time be suitable for you guys? So Makazi and Roxanne, can you please indicate if this time slot is suitable for you?
Hi, yes, it is for me.
Thanks, Temakazi. Roxanne? I hope Roxanne can still hear us, but thanks, Temakazi, we will continue. So yeah, we will see if there are more students that wanted to log in for this session but couldn't because of clashes with other modules, and we will communicate any changes to the time in due course. Then we have one-on-one consultations. One-on-one consultations will be where you have a problem with a specific section of the material that you've identified that you might lack a skill in, and that you would further like to get one-on-one consultation on, and me and you will sit and we will struggle through that question and see if we can get to what really the root cause is of your problem. This will work through query forms that will be sent to you guys during next week. For now, I will give you my email address that you can send an email, and then we will assist you in the meantime through that email address. But going forward, you will receive query forms, and you will be able to submit a query to which I will then reply by either arranging a session with you, or maybe just give you a short answer. It might be something simple that you want to know, in terms of simple, not in terms of it being stupid, simple as in it's quick to answer. And having said that, please guys, this is your session to ask questions. If you don't make use of these sessions, you are only negatively affecting yourself. Use the resources that's provided. It will help you a lot. So please, you can ask me as many questions as you want. I will always try and answer to the best of my ability, and if I don't have the answer, I will definitely get back to you. So make use of that, ask questions during these sessions, and I will try and answer you. Number 6, links to meetings. You will always be sent an email that will indicate when the next session will be, and that session will have a link to join the meeting. Late coming and interrupting the class not allowed. Please, guys. Number 8, technical issues on student side will not be addressed in class. So as I've discussed to the one-on-one consultations, if it's an issue that's relating to the module, that I can deal with. But if it's a technical issue that relates to how does teamwork, can we move assignment dates, or any such question that is specifically university related, not material related, that won't be addressed in the session. So please use the other resources available to you to solve those problems. These sessions are only for the material and the subject. Students not able to hear in class must make use of recordings. All sessions are recorded. This one is also being recorded, so you will have access to it. I've spoken about the attendance register. Please comment your student number in the comment section, and then at the end of the session, please do complete the session evaluation form. Are there any questions at this stage before I move on to the material that we're going to discuss tonight? No questions. I'm moving on. Okay, guys. Again, please, if you have any questions, make use of the hand facility. And if you don't see me reacting to you raising your hand, unmute your mic and please draw my attention to the fact that you have a question. I won't feel offended at all. Okay, AUE3701 skills identification. Remember, we're speaking of skills here that we need to develop. This is not a tutor session. You will have your tutor sessions if there are any scheduled, but in these classes, we will identify what skill you need to pass the subject. We will go through most of the same material, but try and make it as practical as possible. Okay, so stages of an audit process. Excuse me, guys. I have had a lot of meetings today, and I think my throat is starting to get tired. So excuse all the coughing and throat clearing. Okay, stages of an audit process. Guys, auditing doesn't start here. This is not the first time that you are dealing with auditing, and it also does not mean that you have to forget anything or everything that you've learned before this subject or this specific module. Please pay attention to the other modules that you've had or that might influence your auditing or the ability for answering questions in this specific module. There was AUE1601, AUE2602, AUE3701, and AUE3702 to mention just the ones that's really important for this module. If you had any problems with those modules, you are the only person that will be able to identify them and discuss it. If you have any issues with those, please make use of the query facility, raise the query, and we can also discuss it. So please, we need to sharpen your skill set, but you will know how much sharpening it requires. Let's look at the process of auditing. First up, you get the preliminary engagement activities. Secondly, we plan an audit. Then we obtain audit evidence. When we obtain our audit evidence, we need to evaluate how much test of controls are we going to do, and also then substantive procedures. So test of controls, I always refer to test of controls as you making a clay cup. I have a coffee cup here in my hand right now. So there's a specific process in making this cup. We need to assess whether the process that the client is using will ensure that all the cups are perfect, that it runs the way it's supposed to. So we will evaluate the process. So we will execute certain steps within the audit process to test the controls of the client. Based on the soundness of those tests of controls, the result will determine how many cups are we going to actually test. So in test of controls, we will physically walk through the process of the client of how he's making cups. I'm using a very simple example here. Remember, auditing is the auditing of financial statements. I'm using a very layman's term, practical example here. I will look at the process of how the molding is working, how we're making the cups, and then we will say, yes, what you guys are telling me in your procedure manual, for instance, is what's actually happening on the floor. So I will test the controls, and if the controls are found to be effective and adequate and in place, it will affect the number of actual cups that we will select to test. So if we have extremely good tests of controls and it's working well, we will have less substantive procedures, because substantive procedures speaks about obtaining the actual evidence, physical inspections, recalculating, and all of that. So that is substantive procedures. After we've collected our audit evidence through test of controls and substantive procedures, we will immediately evaluate. So we will evaluate how well this client is performing overall. Then we will arrive at a conclusion, which I'm not going to elaborate on now, and we will be over into reporting. But what is applicable? What are the phases that are applicable to you in this module? Firstly, we're going to look at the preliminary engagement activities. Extremely important and almost in every exam. It is really, really important. Planning an audit. Obtaining audit evidence, test of controls. Those are AUE3701 areas. The rest will be in 3702. But remember what I said in the first slide. These sections all also rely on knowledge that you might have had to obtain in previous modules. You need to identify how sound your knowledge and understanding is of those modules. That is that's up to you. Only you can identify and assess that. So let's look at preliminary engagement activities. Firstly, we need to investigate, and we're going to have practical examples of that now. What does it mean to investigate the client? We need to, if you walk into a client on the first day, or say, for instance, a client contacts you and asks you, please assist us in auditing our books. Because remember, there's also regulations in place, there's laws in place that actually requires some of our companies to be audited. They don't have a say in it. Like, for instance, the company that I'm working for is a limited company. In other words, it's a public company and it must be audited. It is required to be regulated in terms of the auditing. There's a specific section in the Companies Act that requires it. So auditing is heavily regulated. So there's a big risk for the auditor to take on certain clients. I'm sure you guys might have seen in the news the moment when, for instance, Sign-Off went down or had that big drop in their share price. Who did they blame first? They blamed two people, or the two organizations, or two elements were blamed first. Firstly, it was the directors, and secondly, it was the auditors, because we as normal people looked at that scenario and we couldn't believe that the auditors couldn't pick up that there might be something wrong. So that's why it's extremely important to investigate your client properly before you take it on. You need to see if there are any threats of independence. Will you, in that position of the client, be able to express an objective opinion? Or is there anything that might affect your independence? And independence is extremely important, because we don't only talk about independence in terms of factual situations. We're also talking about perceived independence here. If you guys know, if we look at the news and we look at some things that's not going so well, there's fraud. We will always look at the situation, and then we will perceive that some people are involved, only because how they are placed towards the person that is being investigated for fraud. So we will automatically, without having seen any facts, we will think there's a link between these two parties, and there might not be. So the big thing with an audit company, when they take on a new client, is they need to ensure that even their involvement with this client might not even be perceived as being lacking in the Department of Independence. So there must be absolutely no threat of independence. Obviously, we also want to see what the integrity of management is, because that will tell us a lot about the company as a whole. If management are displaying signs of not considering the importance of ethics, not considering the effect of legal requirements, I mean, that talks about the integrity of management. In other words, it increases our risk that there might actually be something wrong in the company. And we want to know that up front. So if you have a very conservative management style, where they absolutely build on their internal controls, they believe in their structure and all of that, then you have a management that is strong and a management that you can perceive, I'm using that word deliberately, to have more integrity than a management style or a management group that doesn't display the same characteristics. So very important to take that into account. Thirdly, previous auditor. Our if you look at the ISA standards, we are allowed by ISA 620 to evaluate, or not 620, we are allowed to use the opinion of the previous auditor. Why did he leave? Why did that previous auditor resign? So we must make contact with him. And then obviously what's very important is that we need to determine in terms of the Companies Act that there should be a vacancy. In other words, they are in need of an auditor. We can't just jump in. If there is already an existing auditor, we cannot compete. Okay, please, that's very important to take note of. Secondly, now we move on to us as auditors. We've evaluated, we've now investigated the company, and we see that we are happy with the integrity that they are displaying. We won't have any independence problems. One of our partners' wives isn't involved in that company, or children isn't involved in that company, or doesn't have investments in that company. In other words, we as auditors are happy that there's no independence, integrity issues, or any issues that the previous auditor has brought under our attention. So now we move on to us as the audit team. The question that we need to ask ourselves now, do we, and you need to read the question in the exam very carefully, do we as an audit team, individually or collectively, possess the required skill, competence, and other resources to be able to complete this audit and give an objective opinion at the end? For example, if a mining company phones us and asks, can you guys please put in a tender or give us a quote on what you will ask us to do an audit for us? It is this process. We will investigate the client. Then we will get to the point where I am now, and we will say, this is a mining company. We're going to need a lot of engineering experience, because the client's processes might be so technically difficult for us. We won't be able to tell if they are doing a good job of what they need to do or not. We won't be in a position to tell. So if we don't have the resources, or if we don't have the skill, then obviously we need to see if can we get independent third-party verification of certain areas of the client's business. And the standards do allow us. If you look at the ISAs themselves, 620 speaks of the use of an expert. We are allowed to use an expert. There are certain requirements to using an expert. So if we have to evaluate, say for instance, it's a mining company that mines diamonds. We don't have the technical expertise on our audit team to evaluate the value of the diamonds that they have in stock at the moment. So we can't rely on the client because we are auditing the client. So we will then obviously inquire from the client if we may use an expert, which they will most likely never say no, because that will immediately put a question mark on a lot of things. So we will then get the help or the assistance of an independent third party expert that will look at the value of the diamonds, and he will be in a position to say, yes guys, you can rely, the value is true and accurate, and we will rely then on his evaluation. 610 allows us to use the work that internal audit has done. Bit more risky, because we need to evaluate a lot more things. Because remember, internal auditors are working for the company being audited. So although they also adhere to a code of independence and objectivity, and their structure within the company is at an independent level, or what we could like to call a third level defense. They are very independent themselves, so we might have limited reliance on the work that they have performed. But back to the main branch here, do we have the necessary skill, competence, and resources? So when you read a question, your mind must be extremely open to anything that the question says in terms of skill, competence, resources. Do we have enough team members? Do we have the necessary technical experience to deal with this? So very important that we that we always remember that. Guys, I see 2 new people have joined us. Please make sure that you use the conversation icon on your Teams screen and post your student number there, since we need it for attendance purposes, please. And then I will remind you of some of the other facts at the end of the lesson. Moving on to terms of engagement. Okay, so now we've investigated the client, we've determined that we can do the audit, and now the auditor and the client needs to sit around a table and agree to what will be done. Okay, because we are rendering a service at the end of the day, and we need to tell the client what we can't negotiate on. In other words, what are we restricted to, and what are we willing to do as well. We need to engage with the client, and the engagement letter will give us that platform. Okay, so there will be an engagement letter. We need to look at the financial reporting system of the client. Is it a sound one? Is it one that can be relied upon? Then obviously there needs to be a common understanding between us and the client. Very, very important. So if I look at ISA 210, for instance, agreeing the terms of an engagement. An engagement letter is a contract between the client and the auditor. So the objectives of the auditor is to accept an audit engagement only when the basis upon which it is to be performed has been agreed through. Okay, so we cannot go forward if that engagement letter has signed. And coming from a practical side, having been in the field, I've never been in an audit where that audit engagement hasn't been signed. In fact, we only open the account for the client on our side once we've received the signed engagement letter back. Very important. We must, like I said, ensure that an acceptable financial reporting framework are being used, because that framework produces the annual financial statements. And as you guys know from accounting, the annual financial statements must adhere to IFRS, the International Financial Reporting Standards. So if your accounting statement is, if your accounting system is flawed, your annual financial statements are going to be wrong, and that's going to put a lot of pressure on you as the auditor to determine the accuracy and reliance that you can place on those Fs, and it increases the risk for you to actually accept this audit. A lot of things that you need to do before you can actually get to this stage, and the questions, if time allows us, we will do a nice practical question on this, but let's see how far we get. So yes, very important. The last leg, obviously, ethics. Ethics will always be there. Never forget it. It is a bonus mark. It is psycho-regulated. The code of conduct clearly stipulates what ethical requirements we as auditor and the people we are auditing must adhere to. So it is that is a free mark. Please put that in your mind. Always very important. Guys, now we're going to move over to a question. I'm glad we can actually look at the question. I'm just quickly going to unshare my screen and open the question. And don't worry, it wasn't a question that was sent to you that you should have prepared. It is just one that I want to do in the class with you. Guys, can you guys please raise your hands if you can see my screen? I had some trouble there sharing the screen. Thank you, Tumelo. Temakazi. Roxanne, I'm not sure whether you can see the screen. Okay, I'm continuing. Okay, guys, when I do a question, there's important notes that you must do whenever we are at a question, and that is to assist you with exam technique. That is probably the most important skill that you need to master during this course, and I'm going to focus a lot on it because the questions that I'm doing is questions from previous exam papers, either from UNISA or other universities. It is previous exam papers. Auditing is a universal topic because of the way it's regulated. In other words, the things that we need to know in auditing in one institution is the same in the next institution. So it's a very important subject. Exam techniques, guys, very important. That is the reason why most people fail the subject, is they didn't pay attention on how to approach the question. They learn all the material, they prepare all the material, they do all the questions, but they never do it in an exam setting. Guys, you are not prepared for the exam if you didn't sit at least once under exam conditions preparing a question. Because what we most do is we sit at our desks at home and we do questions, and we never really put ourselves in the same exam conditions and see how did we actually how did we fare in those questions. So big problem there. Adele, your video is on. Thanks, Adele. Sorry, it just caught my eye. Thanks, it's Adele. Okay, so very important exam technique for accounting and auditing. What are the most important exam techniques that you need to have? Adele, your mic is on again. Your camera is on again. Okay, guys. So exam technique, time. You have only a certain number of minutes in which you have to complete a question. And because auditing is a subject that you can write a lot in, we fail to pay attention to the time and we want to write as much as possible. And then we go over our time. Remember, the moment that you go over the time that you've allocated per question, you are actually stealing from a next question. That time is there for a reason. You attempt to the best of your ability what you need to do in that given time, and then you move on. Because the first few minutes, in fact, the first up to 70% of the time, when you start with a new question, in that 70%, you get the most marks that you will get. So to keep on writing and writing, you're probably not even adding marks to your situation. You're only stealing from potential marks from a next question. So never go over your time. Secondly, you read your required first. It's always important to familiarize yourself with what the required section says, because you are going to read quite a lot of information now, and then you're going to read the required, and then you have to read it again. But when you already know that what must jump out at you, you will read it with the mindset of trying to I must identify this, I must identify that. So see how that works for you. It is very important. Read the required first. So let's go to the required. So under A, they ask, discuss the 3 stages of pre-engagement activities and 1 consideration in each of these areas. We've just done that. The slide that I dealt with was the stages of pre-engagement activities. They're only asking for 3 stages. We did 4, the psycho one. Then they say list the factors extracted from the above information in which information which would have an impact on your audit strategy. In other words, scope, direction, and timing. C. List 4 different types of specialized audit evidence which need to be obtained based on the information provided above. Give a brief explanation of each. List and explain the assertions applicable to these transactions and events. Guys, the one I'm focusing on firstly is the first one. That is what we dealt with tonight. So let's read the information. You have recently accepted the engagement to audit the financial statements of Game On Pty Limited after the retirement of the company's previous auditor. Immediately, retirement of the company's previous auditor. Remember when we did that slide I just showed you, we read something about vacancy. The Companies Act requiring us that there must be a vacancy for you to apply or to give your how can I say it, your quotation. But there's also the other consideration that we just discussed is, do we have the skills, the resources? And one of the things that is allowed is to have a discussion with the previous auditor, either for new evidence or for investigating the client. So there's a vacancy and we must talk to that auditor. We need to discuss the client with that auditor. That's already a note that you can make there. You already have 2 marks because you've read the company's previous auditor and that made you remember investigation. So investigation of the client, speak to the previous auditor. Okay. From auditing profession, the following information is of relevance. The company has been established for many years, specializing in gaming equipment. The past few years, audit reports have been unmodified and their financial performance has been excellent. It has a very good reputation in its industry and has received numerous ISO quality awards and certifications pertaining to products as well as to business processes and management achievements. Management achievements. When we investigate our client, we want to see things that speaks about the client in a very good way. There's a few things highlighted in this paragraph alone. Unmodified audit opinion. What does that mean? It also referred to an unqualified audit opinion. In other words, there were no, how can I say, there were no buts. The client is good, but, or the client is I'm putting it extremely in layman terms now. You guys should realize that, hopefully. There's never an except for when you have an unmodified or unqualified audit opinion. It will never say you can rely on the client's financial records except for. That's a qualified opinion. So unmodified mean there's a good history of their work, of their audits. Okay, you already have 2 points there. Management, unmodified, and you can go on and on and on. The question only asks for one per each of the 3 stages. Let's read the next paragraph. The company runs a virtual record keeping system in which all accounting and system documents are electronically generated, processed, stored, and signed through the use of various passwords, fingerprint identification, and cornea recognition technology for high secure transactions. So we can already see that this is a very technical audit. There can be, whoever's on this audit team will have to have lots of skills surrounding a computer and computer systems, and that term is CATS, Computer Assisted Audit Techniques. So whoever's on this team must have those skills. So that's already something that must trigger. Okay. The company's accounting, production, and payroll software are interfaced with each other. In addition, the accounting and production software interfaces with the customer's production systems, enabling online transfer of order, purchase, and billing data. Again, it speaks to our second stage or condition that we need to consider before we take on this client. Very technical client, and we need to ensure that we have the resources for it. Game On Pty Limited has limited international and lucrative client base. International. You must immediately identify if there's international areas that you might have to travel to. You must consider the cost factor. So do we have the necessary skill and resources? Resources also speaks to our own budget. Although we're going to charge the client, we must have the money up front to be able to exercise this audit. We need to be able to do it. Excuse me, guys, I had to take a sip of my coffee. Otherwise, I'm going to start telling you other stories. So, international and lucrative client base. The company imports its materials and manufactures the gaming equipment locally. However, the company has various warehouses in London, New York, Tokyo, and Sydney. Again, the cost of traveling, with a staff complement at each which it uses to store finished goods intended for its international customers. Okay, so because of the need of import its raw materials, the company has entered into a number of FEC contracts with its bank in order to hedge against foreign exchange losses. Again, you can, okay, and this is now the example that I want to give you. What did the question say? Discuss the 3 stages of pre-engagement activities and 1 consideration in each of these areas. You only have 6 marks, okay? But look at all the information that is given that you can populate those 3 areas with. I mean, we already have the new client investigation. We can investigate the client because we can have access to the previous auditor. There's good audit. There's good audit record. Managing integrity. How many did the question ask? 1. We already had 3. So that's why I say it's exam technique is extremely important, because you can easily in an auditing question get stuck in almost a rut of answering as much as possible. You must be extremely vigilant to it. Your question set will always have enough information for you to answer if you have the skill to identify it. So we have 2 skills here that's very important. The first one is the skill of answering a question, exam technique, and identification. You need to be able to read your question and then immediately identify the elements in the question information, the scenario that is given, that will assist you to answer that question as best as possible. So remember, we dealt with 4 areas. First was the investigation. Second was, do we have the resources, the skill? That was the second one. Thirdly, we need to have an engagement letter. Okay. After we've considered, do we want to be associated with the client? Can we do the audit? Then we must have an engagement letter that stipulates all the do's and don'ts, the scope of our work, what the client expects of us and what we expect of the client. Because remember, an engagement letter is similar to a service level agreement, SLA. What is a service level agreement? Is whenever you have someone that renders a service to you, that service that you expect to receive must be documented. It must be a contract, and the contract will tell what you expect from the service provider and what the service provider in terms of payment expects from you. So that engagement letter basically stipulates that. It tells management what management remains responsible for, and it tells what the auditor is now responsible for. So both parties will know who can expect what from who. Very important, letter of engagement. So there we have our 3. You could have gone another extra mile and written the 4th one, which is the psychoethics requirement, the code of conduct. We've already answered this question in more detail that's really necessary. So very important, stick to what the question wants and don't overkill. Guys, I just want to see what, I'm not going to go through the rest of the question there because I think we've answered that. The other questions is questions we will focus on in next week's class because it deals with planning the audit. Because we've now established that we want to have a relationship with the client. Now we will start to plan the audit. So there's about 9 minutes left. Since it's our first session, I would like to open the floor for questions. So please, you don't have to put up your hand. Unmute. I'm going to mute my mic, switch off my camera, mute my mic, and then I will listen for questions. It can be technical questions in this session only. We said no technical questions in terms of the platform and UNISA, but since Adele is listening in, I can ask Adele to assist. But any other question that's module related, please feel free to ask any question.
Charles, this is maybe a good time to remind the students to fill in the attendance register and do the evaluation form as well, please.
Thanks, Adele. If you guys can please, yeah, in the conversation area of your Teams functionality, please click there and list your student number. It will serve as an attendance register. And then please also in that conversation section, if I'm not mistaken, Adele, there's a link to the evaluation of this session. Please evaluate the session. That the evaluation is really important because it's where you can give comments on the quality of the session and what you expect. It's only 4 questions and it will take you it will be very short. Won't take you long to do it.
15 seconds.
Thanks, Adele. Guys, well, some of you might be thinking of questions that you need to know. If I look at the study guide, please go through the study guide. It covers basically what I've discussed with you guys tonight. Very important, any references to the ISAs, please go and read that section. The International Standards of Auditing is very important. It is the regulatory material for auditing. Very important because almost everything that we are discussing comes from the ISAs, but it's only made practical, or explain how it is applied in practice. So very important to go through those sections. Especially materiality. Understand what that means. We're going to discuss it next week. So please, guys, prepare for next week's topic. We've done topic 2, the preliminary audit engagement. As you can see, it was the first stage of the audit. So next up will be topic 3. See, we've discussed this. Investigate the client, determine skills, competence, and resources. Guys, I've said it in the beginning. If you did not do all the questions that is given to you in the study guide or study material that the study guide refers to, and it's not to frighten you, but then you are not prepared for the exam. And it's not just doing it that matters, it's how you do it. Please attempt these questions in the same way that you will attempt your exam question. You have weeks now to prepare for getting ready for the exam. Don't just get ready for the content, get ready for the exam. And a lot of students do not do that. They keep on studying the content and they know the content off by heart. They can name it at any given point, but that's not what this exam will ask you. This exam will refer to the things that you know in theory, but they're going to ask you to apply it in practice. It's going to ask you to look at that question and give it in practice. So please, guys, it's also the way you do the questions that's important. So as I've said, next week's topic is planning an audit. To gain the most out of that session, please go through the material and come with questions. You guys can also come prepared. Identify the skill that you have, that you might not have, that you think you are lacking in, and explain it in that session. And I can promise you, the other students that's participating in this session will also benefit from that. There is no such thing as a stupid question. Only an answer can be slightly off. But there's no problem with the question that you ask. So please. So guys, that will be my topic for next week. I'm muting my mic for the next minute and a half. If you don't have any questions, then I'm gonna say goodbye to you guys just before or at 7. Thank you, guys. That's me for tonight, and we will then reconvene next week, if not communicated otherwise, same time. If you guys have got no other questions, then I'm going to say bye to you guys. Good night. God bless. Goodbye.